"You're not wanted at my wedding," my sister sneered. "But I'll keep the $40K deposit you paid," she hissed. While she planned flowers and vows, I planned something else. I waited outside the church for her. She stepped from the limo, smiling. When she saw what I was holding, her face turned pale. "My name is Kelly Watkins, and I'm 29 years old." The whole thing started with the click of a mouse. A single, insignificant sound that sent $40,000 out of my life forever. It wasn't just money. It was the last 10 years of my life scraped together from late nights, skipped vacations, and 1,000 tiny sacrifices. It was my future, the down payment on a small condo, the safety net that let me sleep at night. Now, it was gone. The recipient was St. Jude's Estate, a wedding venue so grand and exclusive it felt like it belonged in a different century, a place for people who never had to check their bank balance before ordering dinner. It was for the wedding of my sister, Jessica Watkins. Jessica had champagne taste and a tap water budget, as our dad used to say before he passed. She floated through life on a cloud of charm and impossibly high expectations, leaving a trail of unpaid bills and broken promises for me to clean up. I stared at the confirmation screen on my laptop, the negative number burning itself into my retinas. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rolled through my stomach. I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. My phone buzzed, a sharp, demanding sound against the wood, a text from Jessica. "Did you do it yet? The coordinator is waiting," not a thank you, not an "I know this is a lot to ask," just a demand punctuated with a flurry of exclamation points. My fingers felt numb as I typed back a single word, "Done." I hit send and watched the little blue bubble appear next to my message. This was it. This was the price of admission to my sister's new life, and I was footing the bill. This wasn't the first time, not by a long shot. My entire life had been a series of financial first aid applications for Jessica's self-inflicted wounds. I paid for her community college application fees after she missed the deadline for scholarships. I paid for her first car's new transmission when she ignored the check engine light for 3 months. I covered the security deposit on 3 different apartments she bylaid on, leaving me to argue with furious landlords. My role in the family was as fixed as the North Star. I was the sensible one, the planner, the backstop. Jessica was the star, the one with potential who couldn't be burdened with mundane details like rent or consequences. Mom always framed it as my strength, a twisted sort of compliment that felt more like a cage. "You're so good with money, Kelly," she'd say, patting my arm. "Jessica is more of a creative spirit." I kept a silent, mental ledger of these loans, every dollar meticulously recorded in my head, knowing deep down that I'd never be repaid. The $40,000 was just the final, impossible entry, the one that broke the spreadsheet. I remember one Christmas when I was 12. Jessica, then 14, had lost the heirloom locket from our grandmother, a beautiful gold oval with a tiny sapphire chip. She'd cried for a full day, not out of sadness for the locket, but for the drama of the loss. That evening, Mom came into my room. "Kelly, you know how much that locket meant to your sister," she said. "Why don't you give her yours?" "It just means more to her." I didn't have a choice. I took my locket, the twin to the one she'd lost, and handed it over. Seeing it around her neck felt like a piece of me had been stolen. Now, Jessica was marrying Mark Whitmore, an architect whose family was so old money they probably had portraits of their ancestors on their currency. Their wealth, as Jessica explained it, was all tied up in properties and investments. They were asset-rich but cash-poor, a phrase she repeated with an air of sophisticated understanding. For Jessica, the wedding wasn't just a marriage, it was her coronation. It was her official entry into a world she felt she deserved. And the venue was non-negotiable. It had to be St. Jude's. The $40,000 deposit was non-refundable, and Jessica had spun a masterful story to Mark and his family that she had the savings to cover it. The savings were me. I was the silent, invisible backer of her ascent into high society. We were sitting in a small, sunny cafe when she first asked me. She slid the glossy brochure for St. Jude's across the table, her fingernails perfectly manicured against the heavy, cream-colored paper. Her eyes were shining with that dangerous, focused light she got when she wanted something. "It's the only place Mark's mother will approve of," she'd said, her voice catching. A single, strategic tear rolled down her cheek, a performance I'd seen 100 times. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She promised me the maid of honor spot, a front-row seat to her glorious new life. She promised this would be the absolute last thing she ever asked for. She promised this investment would pay off for the whole family, a vague, glittering phrase that meant nothing and everything. I hesitated. I actually opened my mouth to say no, to tell her about my condo savings, about the little folder of listings I kept in my nightstand. Her face hardened instantly, the soft, pleading look dissolving into something sharp and cold. "So your little apartment is more important than my marriage, than my happiness?" The guilt was a physical thing, a hook in my gut she knew just how to twist. That night my mom called, adding another layer of pressure. "Don't be selfish, Kelly," Mom's voice was firm. "This is for the family. Mark's family needs to see we can hold our own. We can't look like we can't afford this." The conversation ended with Jessica getting back on the phone, her voice syrupy sweet again. "You're my sister," she'd whispered. "You'll be right there next to me. This is for us." I chose to believe her. It was the costliest mistake of my life. The first red flag came a week later. The nonrefundable deposit had cleared and my bank account looked like it had been robbed. Jessica had me on a three-way call with the wedding planner, a woman named Chloe who had a voice like brittle sugar and the tactical mind of a four-star general. Jessica's introduction set the tone for everything that was to follow. "Chloe, this is my sister Kelly," she said brightly. "She's my financial backer on this. Not my beloved sister, not my maid of honor, my financial backer." I was a line item, a funding source. Chloe, the planner, didn't miss a beat. She immediately launched into a list of necessary upgrades, her voice painting a picture of a fairy tale wedding that was quickly turning into a financial nightmare. A vintage champagne fountain that cascaded down a pyramid of glasses, artisanal ice sculptures carved into swans, a string quartet for the cocktail hour because a playlist was apparently for peasants. Each suggestion added thousands to the budget, and with every word I could feel the invisible chains of this wedding tightening around me. I tried to gently interject to be the voice of reason. "Are these really essential, Jess?" I asked, my voice sounding small and weak even to my own ears. Jessica cut me off before I could finish the sentence. "Kelly, please," she sighed, the sound dripping with condescension. "Don't be difficult. We need this to be perfect. The Whitmores are used to a certain standard." There was no room for discussion. I was no longer a sister offering advice. I was an ATM, and my objections were just an annoying error message. Chloe then mentioned a couture gown for Jessica, a dress that cost more than my reliable four-door sedan. I stayed silent, the protest dying in my throat. What could I say? I had already given her the $40,000. That was my vote of confidence, my signature on a blank check. The call ended with Jessica telling Chloe with a sickeningly sweet tone, "Don't worry about her, I'll handle the finances." What she meant was she'd handle me. The next clash was over something as trivial as a dress, but it felt like a battle for my very identity. Jessica had chosen the bridesmaid dresses. They were beautiful, I had to admit, but they were a punishing shade of blush pink that made my pale skin look vaguely green, like I was fighting off a stomach flu. When I brought it up gently over text, suggesting maybe a different shade from the same palette, her reply was a dramatic sigh I could feel through the phone. "It's not about you, Kelly," she wrote. "It's about the aesthetic, the photos. You need to fit the color palette." My own comfort and appearance were irrelevant. I was a prop. It didn't stop there. She criticized my choice of shoes for the fitting, sensible, comfortable heels as frumpy. My hairstyle was too severe. Even the simple, classic watch I always wore, a gift from our dad, was a problem. "It's just so practical," she sneered during a video call, wrinkling her nose as if the word itself left a bad taste in her mouth. My practicality, the very trait that had funded her perfect aesthetic, was now an embarrassing flaw. It was a blemish on the flawless portrait of her new life. My first tactic, gentle reasoning, had failed completely. She didn't want a conversation, she wanted compliance. Of course, Mom sided with her. When I called her, hoping for an ally, I got a lecture instead. "Just wear the dress, Kelly," she said, her voice tired. "It's her day. Why do you always have to make things so complicated?" It was the family mantra. Kelly complicates, Jessica dreams. My options were narrowing. I could either shut up and become the silent, bland accessory she wanted, or risk a full-blown family war that I knew I would lose. I felt like I was being slowly erased, painted over in blush pink and beige to better suit the background of Jessica's life. The final straw in this slow-motion train wreck was the guest list. The wedding was still months away, but the planning was in full swing. I had one close friend from college, a woman named Sarah, who had been my rock through everything. I asked Jessica if I could have a +1 so Sarah could be there with me. Jessica paused, and I could hear her scrolling through something on her end of the line. "I don't know," she said, her voice hesitant in a way that was completely fake. "Is she, presentable? I don't want anyone there who doesn't understand the vibe of the event." The insult was so blatant, so breathtakingly cruel that I couldn't speak for a moment. The implication was clear. My friend, and by extension me, were not good enough for her new high society world. We didn't have the right vibe. I finally found my voice and pushed back harder this time. "Jess, I just gave you my life savings," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I want one friend there." Her response was cold and immediate. "We'll see, the tables are filling up fast with Mark's family friends. We can't just have random people there." Sarah, my best friend, was now a random person. My $40,000 investment didn't even buy me a +1. It bought me a temporary spot in the background, pending aesthetic approval. The small but visible cost was my dignity. I was losing myself piece by piece, and I was the one paying for the privilege. I hung up the phone, and the silence in my small apartment felt heavy, suffocating. I was the primary sponsor of a party I wasn't even sure I was truly invited to. Then came an invitation that felt like an olive branch but was really just another test. Dinner at the Whitmore family home. Jessica sold it as a massive victory. "They want to meet you," she chirped over the phone. My wonderful, supportive sister. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was my chance to be seen as more than just a bank account. That hope died the moment I stepped into their house. It wasn't a home, it was a museum. The air was still and heavy, smelling of old wood, lemon polish, and money. Dark, imposing portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared down from the walls, their eyes seeming to judge my department store blazer. Mark's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, were polite in a distant, formal way, like curators of the museum they happened to live in. Mrs. Whitmore's smile was a thin, bloodless line. Mr. Whitmore shook my hand with a grip that was firm but conveyed no warmth. The conversation over dinner was stilted and awkward. They asked about my job as an accountant. I tried to explain my work, how I helped small businesses navigate their finances and stay afloat. Before I could finish, Jessica jumped in, laughing that light, tinkling laugh she used when she was trying to charm people. "Oh, Kelly is my numbers guru," she announced to the table. "So practical, she lives in a spreadsheet." It wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal, a neat little label to package me as a dull but useful tool for the benefit of her new family. Mrs. Whitmore gave that thin smile again. "How sensible," she said. "Every family needs one." I felt my cheeks burn. I might as well have been a toaster. Mark, my future brother-in-law, was kind but completely oblivious, utterly captivated by Jessica's performance. David Thorne, the best man, was there too. He was effortlessly charming, handsome, and seemed to fit into this world perfectly. He and Jessica shared an easy rapport, laughing at a private joke here and there that I wasn't privy to. Their familiarity felt like another wall between me and them. This dinner was supposed to be my reward, a sign of inclusion. Instead, it was a showcase for my otherness. The true humiliation came over dessert, a slice of cheesecake so small it looked lonely on the big plate. Mr. Whitmore raised his crystal glass of wine. "A toast," he said, his voice resonating in the quiet dining room. "To Jessica, a wonderful addition to our family, and to the wedding which I hear is being managed so beautifully." Jessica preened, tilting her head and accepting the praise as if she'd personally earned every penny to pay for it. "She didn't mention my $40,000, she didn't mention my sacrifice at all." Then she turned the spotlight on me in the most backhanded, cruel way imaginable. "And I have to thank my sister Kelly," she said, her voice sweet as poison. She looked right at me, a fake smile plastered on her face. "She's been so helpful. It's wonderful that she's found a way to contribute to the family, even with her modest means." The table went silent. The phrase modest means hung in the air, a deliberate, calculated insult designed to put me firmly in my place. It was a verbal confirmation of my inferior status. I saw a flicker of something in David Thorne's eyes. Was it pity? Amusement? I couldn't tell. I felt a hot, crawling shame creep up my neck and spread across my face. She had taken my greatest sacrifice, the liquidation of my entire future, and turned it into a weapon to humiliate me, to highlight the vast, unbridgeable gap between her new world and my old one. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. My social standing had just been publicly executed in front of my sister's future in-laws, and she was the one holding the axe. I called my mom the next day, my voice still shaking with a mixture of fury and hurt. I explained what Jessica had done, how she'd used my own money to frame me as some kind of charity case. I was expecting sympathy, outrage, some maternal defense. What I got was annoyance. "Kelly, you're being too sensitive," Mom said, her voice sharp. "Jessica is under a lot of pressure. You can't take everything so personally." I felt the ground give way beneath me. She then launched into a full-blown accusation, her words twisting the knife Jessica had already planted in my back. "You have to understand, she's marrying into a different world now. Things are different. I think you're just jealous of her new life." Jealous? I wanted to scream. I had funded this new life. "Mom, she used my money to buy her way in and then used my modest means to insult me in front of them," I argued, my voice cracking. "It's just words, Kelly," she said, her tone utterly dismissive. "You need to be the bigger person here. Think of the family." That's when the last piece of my denial crumbled. The family wasn't a team. It was a system, a machine designed for one purpose: to protect and advance Jessica's ambitions. I was just a cog in that machine, easily replaceable and completely expendable. My feelings were not only irrelevant, they were an inconvenience. My support system wasn't a system at all. It was a one-way street, and all the traffic was headed straight for Jessica. The stakes were no longer about money or respect. They were about my own identity. If I let this go, if I just absorbed this latest blow, I would disappear completely. After that disastrous phone call with Mom, the dynamic shifted from subtle exclusion to a full-blown freeze-out. My texts to Jessica about wedding details, fittings, schedules, anything I was supposed to be involved in as maid of honor went unanswered for hours, then for days. When she finally did reply, her messages were curt and cold, single words that felt like tiny slaps. "Handled. Chloe is on it. Don't need you for this." I was being ghosted by my own sister. My utility as her financial backer had expired the moment the deposit cleared, and now my presence as her practical and modest sister was a liability to her new image. I tried to call Mark directly once, hoping to get a simple answer about the rehearsal dinner time. Jessica answered his phone. "Mark's swamped," she said, her voice strained with false cheerfulness. "What do you need?" "I can pass it on." I was being completely shut out, walled off from the very event I had made possible. The pressure was now entirely psychological. Every unanswered call, every dismissive text felt like a small nail being hammered into a coffin. A coffin for our relationship, for the illusion of family I had clung to for so long. I started to see it clearly. This wasn't just petty drama, it was a strategy. They were intentionally pushing me to the fringes, isolating me so that by the wedding day I would be a quiet, grateful, and powerless guest with no voice. The simmering resentment I'd been feeling for weeks began to cool, hardening into something else, a cold, clear resolve. They thought they could erase me. They were profoundly wrong. The text came 2 weeks before the wedding, a digital summons that felt like a death sentence. It was from Jessica. "We need to talk. Meet me at the St. Jude's bridal suite." Now, the lack of any warmth, the blunt command, it set my teeth on edge. I drove there in a heavy silence, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach with every mile. The estate was breathtakingly beautiful, its manicured lawns and stately architecture feeling like a cruel mockery of my shrinking place in this story. Chloe, the planner, met me at the door with a frosty, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. She led me through the opulent halls to the bridal suite without a word. The suite was a chaotic fantasy of tulle, dress bags, flower samples, and half-empty champagne bottles. Jessica was standing by the massive bay window, looking out over the gardens. She was wearing a white silk robe, her hair perfectly styled, and she already looked like she owned the place. And sitting on a plush velvet armchair, looking uncomfortable but resolute, was my mom. It was an ambush, a 2-on-1 assault. I knew in that instant that this was not a conversation. It was a verdict, and I was the one on trial. The room, with its gilded mirrors and ridiculously high ceilings, suddenly felt small and suffocating, a gilded cage where my relationship with my sister was about to be executed. Jessica turned slowly from the window, her expression as smooth and unreadable as polished marble. "Kelly," she began, her voice completely devoid of emotion, "we've made a decision." She paused for dramatic effect. "It's not going to work for you to be in the wedding party." I just stared at her, the words not quite making sense. "What do you mean?" I managed to say. "The dresses are already ordered. We had the final fitting last week." She waved a dismissive hand as if swatting away a fly. "It's more than that," she said, and now her voice gained a sharp, cruel edge. "The Whitmores and Mark. We all feel it's better if you don't attend the wedding at all." The words hit me like a physical blow. I think I actually staggered back a step. "You're uninviting me from your wedding?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "My wedding? The wedding I paid for? It's just the aesthetic," she said, using that word again like a shield. "You don't fit. Your energy is all wrong. It's my special day, and I can't have you there looking miserable and making everyone uncomfortable." Then my own mother chimed in, her voice weak but firm, driving the betrayal home. "It's for the best, honey," she said, refusing to meet my eyes. "You'd be uncomfortable anyway. These aren't your kind of people." They had used me, taken every last drop I had to give, and were now casually discarding the empty wrapper. I was reeling, my mind struggling to process the sheer, stunning audacity of it all. My thoughts went straight to the one tangible thing left, the money. "The deposit, Jessica," I said, my voice shaking. "My $40,000. I want it back." Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. It was the ugliest sound I had ever heard in my life. "Oh, Kelly, don't be so transactional," she sneered, her lip curling in disgust. "Consider it a gift." A wedding gift from my loving sister. The room spun. She wasn't just uninviting me. She was robbing me, openly and without a single shred of shame, right in front of our mother. "You can't be serious," I whispered, finally looking at my mom, pleading with my eyes for her to step in, to say something, to fix this. Mom wouldn't meet my gaze. She just stared down at her hands, twisting her gold wedding band around and around her finger. Her silence was my answer. She was complicit. She approved. I had burned down my entire financial future for them. In return, they had just doused me in gasoline and tossed me a lit match. My loyalty, my love, my endless willingness to be the bigger person were all now just ashes. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a declaration of war, but I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I didn't beg or plead or list all the things I'd done for them over the years. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me, a chilling clarity that felt like ice water in my veins. I looked from Jessica's smug, triumphant face to my mother's cowardly, averted one, and I saw them. I saw them for exactly what they were, finally and completely. "I see," I said, my voice flat and cold and empty. It seemed to unnerve them. They had been expecting hysterics, a dramatic scene that would validate their decision to cast me out. They didn't get one. I turned my back on them and walked out of the suite, my sensible heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. I didn't look back. The wedding was in 14 days. They thought they had 14 days to celebrate their victory, to finalize their perfect aesthetic. They had no idea what they had just done. They had just given me 14 days to plan my response. As I walked to my car, the shock began to recede, replaced by a pure, unadulterated rage that was colder and harder than steel. They thought this was the end of the story. But I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was just the beginning. I drove home in a complete daze, the beautiful scenery outside my car window a meaningless blur. But by the time I walked into my own apartment and shut the door, the numbness was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, practical need to sever every last tie. I still had a few things left at the condo Jessica shared with Mark. A box of sentimental items from my childhood bedroom, a heavy winter coat, a reading lamp I'd lent her. I pulled out my phone and sent her a text. "I'm coming over in 1 hour to get my things. Leave a key under the mat." It wasn't a request, it was a statement of fact. Her reply was a single, arrogant letter. Kay walking into her opulent condo an hour later felt like entering enemy territory. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lily candles and my own fresh betrayal. It was an assault on the senses. I went straight to the guest room where my box was stored, avoiding the living room with its framed photos of her and Mark looking happy and carefree. It felt surreal to be a trespasser in a life I had helped to fund. I worked quickly, my movements mechanical and efficient. I grabbed my coat from the back of the closet, unplugged the lamp from the wall. I just wanted to be out of there, away from the ghost of my own generosity. Then I saw it. On the dresser, half hidden under a stack of glossy bridal magazines, was a small, plain manila folder. It looked completely out of place, too official and boring for the surrounding chaos of lace samples and seating charts. Curiosity, or maybe it was fate, made me pick it up. My hand was shaking slightly. The folder wasn't sealed. My heart started to pound in my chest, a slow, heavy rhythm. The header on the single sheet of paper inside was from a medical laboratory I recognized. The title was printed in bold, black letters. Paternity test results. My blood ran cold. My fingers felt like ice as I opened the folder completely. The names were listed clearly. Mother, Jessica Watkins. Child, Leo Watkins, her 2-year-old son. Alleged father, Mark Whitmore. Tested party, David Thorne. David Thorne, Mark's best friend. The best man. My eyes scanned the page, skipping over the technical jargon and genetic markers until I found the conclusion at the bottom, written in stark, simple terms that a child could understand. The probability of paternity is 999%. David Thorne is the biological father of the child, Leo Watkins. This was it. This was the truth. The entire foundation of Jessica's perfect life, her engagement, her wedding, her claim on the Whitmore family legacy, was a fraud. Little Leo, the sweet 2-year-old boy Mark absolutely adored, the child he was raising as his own son, was not his. He was the son of Mark's best friend. My $40,000 wasn't just a wedding expense, it was seed money for a multi-million-dollar lie. I stood there in the silent guest room, the paper trembling in my hand, the world tilting completely on its axis. This wasn't a trump card, this was a nuclear bomb. My first instinct was primal: drop it, run, pretend I never saw it. This was a level of destruction I had never even contemplated. This wasn't just about exposing a lie. This was about detonating lives, Mark's, David's, little Leo's. Then I thought of Jessica's sneering face in that bridal suite. Consider it a gift. I thought of my mother's silent complicity, her refusal to even look at me. This was my irreversible choice. I could walk away, absorb the loss of my money, my family, and my dignity, and let her get away with a crime far greater than stealing from me, or I could use it. I could burn her perfect, fraudulent world to the ground. I carefully folded the report, slid it into my purse, and walked out of the condo without looking back. The decision was made in that silent, lily-scented room. I accepted the personal cost right then and there. Using this wouldn't just end my relationship with Jessica and my mom, it would salt the earth where it once grew. There would be absolutely no coming back from this. My goal was no longer to get my money back. That seemed laughably small now. My goal was bigger, riskier, and absolute. I would force the truth into the light, no matter who it burned. The old Kelly, the sensible, accommodating, peacemaking Kelly, died in that guest room. In her place stood someone new, someone who understood that some accounts can only be settled by torching the entire ledger. The attack started the very next morning before my coffee had even finished brewing. My phone lit up on the counter, vibrating hard enough to rattle the spoon in the mug. Mom's name. I let it ring until the sound got under my skin, then swiped to answer. "Have you lost your mind?" Mom didn't say hello. Her voice was a sharp, shaking thing that reminded me of plates clattering in a sink. "Jessica says you broke into her home. I told her I was coming to get my things." I kept my voice even. I stirred my coffee and watched the cream swirl into a storm. "You are lucky she doesn't call the police for trespassing." Mom's breath hitched. "You've gone too far, Kelly, too far. After everything we've done for you, you're going to punish your sister because you're jealous of her happiness." "What is wrong with you?" I could hear a television in the background, voices rising and falling like waves. Mom sniffed hard. She was winding herself up, building a case in the only court that mattered to her, her own. "I got my things," I repeated. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted burned. "That's all. You're being so cold, so cruel." She was crying now, but it didn't sound like hurt. It sounded like a performance. "I am ashamed of you." "Do you hear me? Ashamed." The words used to cut me to the bone. Now they slid off, dull and harmless. They were fighting a battle from last week. They had no idea the ground had shifted under their feet. "I have nothing more to say to you," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I didn't try to change her mind. I pressed the red button and set the phone down. My hand didn't shake. I stood at the counter for a long minute and listened to the quiet hum of my refrigerator. In the silence, the truth felt like a coin in my pocket, small, solid, undeniable. They wanted me to flinch, to run back, to apologize for breathing. But the part of me that used to hurry to fix it was gone. I rinsed my cup, dried it, and put it away, each soft sound in my kitchen neat and final. Let them throw their first stones. I wasn't even in the same fight anymore. The texts started rolling in before lunch. At first, single pings that I ignored, then a steady rain. "My Aunt Donna, who sends inspirational quotes every morning, heard you're struggling. Don't let jealousy make you ugly. God sees everything." A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Wow, just wow. "I can't believe you'd do this to Jess right before her big day. An old family friend I only saw at barbecues. This isn't you. Apologize and show up. Do better." They were all different voices saying the same thing. I was the problem. I was the bitter one, the small one, the one ruining everything. The story was simple and catchy, like a song you don't like but can't get out of your head. Kelly blew up over money. Kelly can't stand that Jessica is leveling up. Kelly needs to get over herself. None of them asked me what happened. They didn't want facts. They wanted a villain who made their group chats spicy. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I blocked numbers one by one, a little thumb dance that felt almost like sweeping crumbs off a table. The phone grew quiet for a minute, then another cluster would pop up from new numbers, screenshots of a text thread I wasn't in, my name in a messy storm of bubbles. I put the phone face down and scrubbed the sink, wiped the counters, vacuumed the rug, anything to give my hands a job. The small chores calmed me. They were things I could control. When my phone buzzed again, I let it vibrate in a dull, rhythmic way and counted the seconds until it stopped. Once, I would have gone hoarse explaining myself. I'd have begged to be heard, offering receipts and memories like proof. Now, I let their noise pass over me like weather. It stung, but it didn't change a thing. The more I blocked, the smaller my world became. The family group thread disappeared. An aunt's Christmas photo stream vanished. Old connections blinked out like street lamps shutting off one by one, but the shrinking wasn't scary, it was quiet. For the first time in months, maybe years, the inside of my life didn't feel crowded with other people's wants. It felt like a room I could finally arrange. I brewed tea and stood at the window while it steeped, watching a man in a blue hoodie walk his dog and fuss with the leash. The steam warmed my face. In the tea's metal spoon reflection, my eyes looked clear. Let them talk. Let them paint me however they needed to sleep at night. I held something they couldn't imagine. The secret in my bag was like a steady heartbeat. I didn't need their approval or their noise. I needed time and a plan and a very steady hand. 3 days later, when the storm seemed to have eased into a dull drizzle, the concerned call came. My phone rang with a number I recognized, and I answered because I knew she would keep trying if I didn't. "Kelly, honey," Carol said, stretching my name into something soft and sugary. She had been at every birthday party when I was little, a nice woman with big rings and a perfume that smelled like gardenias. "Your mother is worried sick. She says you're not yourself." "I'm fine, Carol." I sat down at my small kitchen table and traced the wood grain with my finger. "How are you?" she sighed, the kind of sound that makes you think of a hand pressed to a forehead. "Oh, you know, I just hate to see good people hurting each other, that's all. You girls have always been so close." We both knew that wasn't true, but I let it pass. "What can I do for you? It's just..." She dropped her voice a little, like we were sharing a secret. "Is this really about the money? Because if it is, I think we can find a way to make this right. Maybe a payment plan." Jessica feels terrible about how this all went down. She's heartsick. I pinched the bridge of my nose and closed my eyes, letting her words stack up like blocks. "A payment plan," I repeated. I could hear the careful, testing tone. She was a fishing line dropped into water, feeling for a bite. "Nobody wants it to be like this," Carol went on. "If you could just say you're sorry for making things tense, she's willing to meet you halfway. She wants you to be part of the day, you know." She said that. Halfway, apologize, part of the day. The words felt like stale bread. They were offering me crumbs and asking me to call it a feast. And underneath all of it was the real question they were trying to answer. What was my price? Could this be smoothed over with a little cash and a lot of silence? "There's nothing to work out," I said, keeping my voice gentle. I even smiled because smiles can be heard. "I've moved on." A beat of silence. In the background, I could hear her clock ticking, a slow, even metronome. "Are you sure?" she pressed, a little strain creeping into the sweetness. "I would hate to see you throw away your relationship with your mother and your sister over a misunderstanding." "I'm sure." I looked over at my purse on the counter, the manila corner of the folder peeking out like a paper tongue. "I hope you have a nice day, Carol." "Well," she said with a small huff that was almost a laugh. "I tried." "You did," I said and hung up. I placed my phone on the table and sat still for a long time, listening to my apartment breathe, the heater clicking, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, a bus sighing outside. They had tried shouting, then whispering. They had tried shame, then sugar. None of it touched the place I lived now. I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I wasn't waiting for permission. I rose, pulled my coat from the hook, and grabbed my purse. It was time to get ready for the real work. I drove to a copy shop 2 neighborhoods away, a place with sun-faded posters in the window and a bell over the door that jingled when I went in. The air smelled like warm plastic and ink. A teenager in a gray shirt sat behind the counter, chewing gum and scrolling on his phone. "Hey," he said without looking up. "Self-serve is over there, thanks." I picked a machine at the far end, an old beast with a cracked corner. I took the folder from my bag and slid the report out, careful not to crease it. My hands were steady. I fed the paper into the tray, pressed color copy, then pressed it again, then again. Each page slid out smooth and warm, the black letters crisp and heavy. Mother, child, alleged father, tested party, the conclusion that changed everything. I flipped each copy, checking for streaks or smudges, then placed them in a neat stack. I paid in cash and left $1 in the tip jar because the bellboy's eyes had flicked up at just the right time and he had pointed me to a better machine without saying a word. From there, I went to a small stationery store. It smelled like cedar and old paper, the kind of place where you speak quietly without knowing why. I ran my fingers along thick envelopes until I found exactly what I wanted, cream-colored, heavy enough to feel important. I bought 3 and a black pen that made a clean, dark line. On my way home, I stopped at the bank. The lobby was cold and bright with a fake ficus tree by the teller line. I smiled at the woman behind the desk and asked to access my safe deposit box. She led me through a door and down a hallway into a quiet room where keys turned with soft clicks. I placed 1 copy inside the metal drawer tucked flat against the bottom. Insurance. If my apartment burned down, if someone stole my bag, if I got hit by a bus, the truth would still exist somewhere cool and clean. Back at my apartment, I spread everything out on the table like a neat little altar. 3 cream envelopes, 3 copies, the black pen. I printed names in slow, careful letters: Jessica, Mark Whitmore. The third I left blank. I sealed Jessica's first, running my thumb over the strip until the paper caught and held. I pressed along the edge until it felt airtight. Next, I pulled my new suit from the garment bag and hung it on the outside of my closet. Charcoal gray, simple lines. It looked like confidence you could wear. I ran my palm down the sleeve, felt the smooth weight of the fabric. I picked out a white shirt, polished my low heels, set aside the earrings Dad had given me for my 21st birthday, small pearls that matched a kind of quiet I still wanted to keep. Every choice was a sentence in a language I knew well. I am serious. I am not here to beg. I am not here to be pretty for your photos. I packed my tote with what I'd need, tissues just in case my hands started to sweat. A small bottle of water, a granola bar, my wallet, a second pen, my phone charger. I slipped the second sealed envelope inside, the one with Mark's name. I slid the third copy into a file folder and tucked it into the back of my freezer behind a bag of peas. Cold keeps things safe. Then I sat down and breathed. In, out, I could feel the rhythm settle into my bones. They were playing a loud, messy game, tossing gossip like confetti. They were spread thin. I was narrow and sharp. While they gossiped, I gathered. While they bullied, I planned. I wasn't angry the way I used to be, wild and hot. I was something colder now, focused. Exact. I went to bed early, the suit hanging straight and ready, the envelopes lined up like calm soldiers. Tomorrow, I'd check the timing of the ceremony. Tomorrow, I'd confirm the route for the limousine. For tonight, I slept in a clean room with the truth resting in my freezer and a steady, quiet fire in my chest. Something about Mark's whole asset-rich, cash-poor line itched under my skin. It sounded neat, like a phrase you repeat when you don't want people to ask for details. I made tea, sat at my dining table with my laptop, and started doing the kind of digging I do when numbers don't add up. Nothing sneaky, just public stuff anyone could see if they cared enough to look. The Whitmore name popped up everywhere: buildings, a scholarship, a family foundation. Newspaper clips showed ribbon cuttings and Mark standing next to his dad, both of them smiling in that quiet, trained way people smile for society pages. Property records were a maze, but a pattern formed if you stared long enough. Different houses and lots didn't seem to belong to people, they belonged to family trusts. A dull word, but it explained a lot. The money wasn't sitting in a checking account. It was locked up tight in boxes with rules written on the lid. I found one filing that spelled it out in plain English. Mark was a beneficiary, but he didn't get the keys until he hit a certain age or until his dad passed away. He was 32, the age listed was 45. That meant Mark got an allowance from the family money every year. Comfortable, sure, nice apartments, nice dinners, a car that started every time, but it wasn't blank check money. Not burned 6 figures on a party money. I sat back and let that sink in. Jessica had spun the story like she was marrying a prince with a chest of gold he could carry around town. In truth, the gold lived in a vault, and the vault only opened on a timer. She hadn't picked a rich guy by accident. She had picked a rich future. A very specific ladder that would one day put her on a balcony with the downtown lights at her feet. The $40,000 I gave wasn't a kind gesture to help with a dream. It was a down payment on her long con. She wanted the wedding so the old families would nod. She wanted the photos in that place so she could point to them like a passport. I rubbed my thumb along the rim of my mug and watched a tea leaf swirl, and for the first time I could see the shape of what she was building. It wasn't a house. It was a trap. The piece I'd ignored came back to me like a pebble in a shoe, the paperwork Jessica had complained about months ago. It's so unromantic, she'd whined over wine, pouting at the document she wanted me to pity her for. Now it clicked. The Whitmores weren't dumb, they protected what they had. Of course there was a contract before marriage with rules about what stayed where if things went south. A paper like that slams a lot of doors. But one door always stays cracked open, and Jessica had found it. A child. A child connects two people forever, no matter what any paper says. A child means money moves in a different way, monthly support, school costs, strings that never get cut. A child inside a powerful name comes with a glow that leaks into everything around it. But here's the catch. For that glow to matter, the child has to be the family's child. It has to be Mark's. That's why the test result in my freezer felt less like proof and more like a flare fired into a dark sky. Jessica hadn't just cheated. She'd built a plan around a baby. She'd made a timeline. Secure the ring, show the heir, step through the door that a contract couldn't close. And she'd done it while smiling at holiday dinners and posing for pictures on the Whitmore lawn. The thought of Leo made my chest ache. He was 2. He giggled when I made little cars honk with my mouth. He reached for Mark's neck and hid his face there when he got shy. He didn't ask to be used as a key. No one ever asks to be that. The more I looked at the days leading to the wedding, the more I saw the pieces stacking up. The asset-rich excuse, the rush for St. Jude's for the right look, the constant push for perfect. Jessica didn't just want pretty. She wanted leverage. My $40,000 had been the first shove to get the rock rolling. My hands went still on the table. There wasn't a path left where I quietly moved on and let it slide. There was Jessica's path where she crossed a finish line with balloons and applause, and there was mine where I put a foot down and said enough. I wasn't saving money anymore. I was saving a stranger named Mark from a hurricane I could see and he couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about David Thorne. His name pulsed like a bruise. Every memory of him shifted once I knew, the easy grin. The hand on Mark's shoulder at dinner. The way he and Jessica had traded looks like cards they didn't want anyone else to see. I searched his name and it didn't take long to find the glossy press release from Mark's firm. David had been pulled up last year, praised for being a trusted leader. There were photos of the two of them on job sites, hard hats tilted back, squinting into the sun. Brothers without blood. Was David a willing partner in this? A fool who got caught in a net and didn't know it until it was too late? I ran their timeline in my head, circling back to little things I'd ignored. A joke he made at dinner that only Jessica laughed at. The way he'd stood a little too close when she took his glass to taste his wine, like the space between them was a rug they both knew well. Their closeness wasn't loud. It was the opposite. It was the quiet of a secret that had been kept for too long. He'd stayed next to Mark, eaten his food, taken his paycheck, planned his wedding, and played with his son while knowing that the son wasn't Mark's. That wasn't an accident. That was a choice. David had helped build the lie because it gave him a front row seat to the show and a back door to the woman he couldn't leave alone. If I'd had doubts about burning the playbill, they died right there. The show didn't deserve the stage. It didn't even matter why David did it. Whether he thought Jessica would pick him in the end, or whether the thrill was enough, or whether he was afraid of the fallout and just kept walking deeper into the maze. The result was the same. Mark, with his careful smile and old-world house, was a Mark in more ways than one. The person he trusted most outside his family had gutted him. I pictured David in his suit, tying a bow tie in a mirror, practicing toasts and smiles. I pictured him holding Leo while Jessica fixed her lipstick in a reflection he also took up space in. It turned my stomach. Some betrayals have a stink you can't wash off. I knew then that there was no version of the story where I whispered the truth and then let the liars decide how loud it should be. They had been loud for months with their pretty lies. The truth deserved a mic. I sat with the copies on my table and the suit on my door and let the path light itself. The plan couldn't be messy or cruel for the sake of being cruel. It had to be simple, clean, and timed. It had to force the truth into the exact hands that needed to hold it, at the exact moment the lie would try to make itself permanent. First, I'd face Jessica, not hours or days before, but at the very door of her prize. She'd see my face and understand which ledger I had opened. I'd give her one last chance to be a person, to find Mark and yank her own lie into daylight. I didn't expect her to take it. Jessica ran from hard things and called it self-care, but the offer mattered for me. It drew a line between justice and spite. Second, the delivery: words can be denied, paper can't. A text gets lost, an email gets hacked, but a thick cream envelope sealed, handed to the man who was about to make vows, that lands. I had my copy with his name in careful letters. The question was how to put it where there'd be no gatekeeper to snatch it away before he saw it. That's when the limo came to mind. The groom and the best man ride together. The limousine would be there like a stage prop waiting to do its one job. A windshield wiper makes a neat clip against paper. It turns a thing you could miss into a thing you have to touch to start your day. If Jessica bolted, and she might, I'd already have made my move. I'd slide the envelope under the wiper and let the car do the delivery. There isn't a chauffeur alive who doesn't clear his windshield. Third, backup: one copy in the bank. One in my bag, one in the freezer. If the day went sideways, if someone tried to grab my purse or knock the paper out of my hands, the truth wouldn't disappear. You don't walk into a storm with one candle and hope. I pictured the morning. I pictured the church steps, the sharp click of my heels on the sidewalk, the feel of thick paper between my fingers, my voice level and low when I spoke to her. The small flinch in her eyes when she saw the header and the names. Not a scream, not a scene, just gravity finally doing what it does. For months, they'd played like rules were for other people. On that day, rules would come home. I smoothed my palm over the suit one more time. I could almost hear Dad's voice in the silence, his calm, steady way of saying my name when numbers on a page started to dance. Take your time, Kel, check it twice. Then do what you know is right. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to beg. I was going to show up on time with the truth dressed like a wedding invitation. And when the music started, either Jess would walk in with a confession or the windshield would carry the message to the person who needed it most. It wasn't just revenge anymore, it was a rescue, not for Jessica, not for Mom, not even for me, though that was part of it. It was a rescue for a man about to stand at an altar under a weight he didn't deserve. It was a rescue for a little boy who needed grown-ups who didn't lie about who he was. And it was a rescue for my own voice, the one that had been smothered under "be nice and don't make a scene" for far too long. The plan was set. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in weeks I felt steady all the way through. The night before the wedding, my apartment felt like a museum after closing, too still. Every small sound seemed loud and important: the hum of the heater, the ice clink when I refilled my water glass, the faint city noise seeping through my window. I'd hung the charcoal suit on my closet door. It looked like a person waiting in the dark, patient and sure. My 2 cream envelopes sat on the table, edges perfectly lined up, the names in my careful handwriting. The third copy slept in the freezer behind a bag of peas, the paper cold and safe. I tried to read the same sentence 3 times and nothing stuck. I made pasta, ate 2 bites, and pushed the bowl away. My phone screen was blank, the room lit by a single lamp that threw a soft oval of light across the table. I pulled out a chair and sat, tracing the grain of the wood with my fingertip like a path. Part of me wanted to tear open the envelopes and rip the papers into long, thin strips. I pictured feeding them to the garbage disposal and watching the paper turn to mush. I pictured putting on pajamas and pretending none of this had ever happened. Doubt crept in like a draft from a cracked window. Was I really about to do this? Was I going to take all the memories I still held, snowmen and birthday cakes and our matching pajamas on Christmas, and set them on fire? My chest felt tight, like a hand was pushing down on it. I closed my eyes and saw little flashes of us as kids, Jessica's hair tangled from sleep, me helping her braid it, her turning to me for help with homework. Us on the swings behind our old apartment, our feet pumping the air in perfect time. A tear slipped down my cheek before I felt it. I wiped it away with the back of my hand and felt a slow, heavy ache in my ribs. I wasn't a person who cried much, but this wasn't just about a wedding, it wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of being told to move over, to make room, to be quiet, to let her shine. The thought of being the one to break the last thread between us made my stomach twist. Maybe I could let it go, maybe I could take the loss and disappear. Move, change my number, start again, and let them have their pretty lie. I stood up and walked to the window. The streetlight outside spread pale gold over the sidewalk. A couple walked by, arms linked, their voices low. A dog trotted, the leash slack. My breath fogged the glass. I pressed my fist against the cool pane and let the cold bite me back into my body. My suit hung there, quiet and sure. The envelopes waited. Every minute I stood in this room doing nothing was a minute Jessica moved toward a future she hadn't earned. I sat back down, I folded and unfolded a napkin. I told myself to just make it to the morning and see how I felt then. Around 10, my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. A photo popped up with no words, just pixels lined up to punch me in the gut. It was a picture from the rehearsal dinner. Jessica was laughing, head thrown back a little, her veil pinned loosely just for the practice. Her hand was tilted to show off the ring. A cluster of champagne glasses sparkled on the table and fairy lights hung behind her like stars. And around her neck, catching the light, was the locket. My locket, the one I'd kept in a small box as a kid, the one I used to open just to brush my thumb over the tiny sapphire chip. The one Mom made me hand over because it just means more to her. I could see the fine chain, the little hinge, the way it lay against her skin like it had finally found the person it was meant for. I felt a heat in my face I couldn't swallow down. The old hurt rose up so fast it stole my breath. I remembered the weight of it in my palm, cool and smooth, the click when it closed. I remembered giving it to her, the air in my room feeling like it was leaving, the quiet afterward like a fog. I remembered how Mom had smiled like I'd done something noble when it felt like I'd given away a piece of my own name. That locket had been the first version of this same story, my belonging, my love, my right to hold something precious, rebranded as hers. There was no mistaking the message in that picture. Jessica was still wearing what she took from me without remorse, flashing it at her party like a trophy. It wasn't about the medal, it was about the pattern. I give, she gets. I disappear so she can glow. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. Something moved in me then, not the hot, wild fury that makes you throw things, but something steadier, deeper. A rising line drawn down the center of my life. This was the book closing. This was the stamp on the last page. I put my phone face down and rested my hands on the table, palms flat. If I did nothing, I'd be agreeing that this was my role forever. I'd be pinning my own mouth shut. The locket was just a symbol, but it was the right one. It was what this all felt like. Every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I'd swallowed a hurt because the family needed quiet. Every time Mom called me the sensible one like it was praise when it was a way to tell me I didn't get to want things. The picture made my choice clear in a way doubt couldn't smudge. I couldn't be the person who let this go. That person didn't exist anymore. I stood up and poured out the cold pasta. I washed the bowl slowly, the warm water running over my hands, turning my skin pink. The small, simple act steadied me. I dried the bowl and set it in the cabinet. I made tea. The kettle clicked when it got hot enough, a crisp little sound like a yes. By midnight, my apartment was clean and quiet again. I moved through each room like a checklist I wanted to do right. I made sure the suit was pressed. I polished my shoes until I could see a blurry version of my face. I placed a tissue and a small bottle of water in my bag. I set my keys in their spot by the door and checked them twice. When I came back to the table, I looked at the envelopes and didn't see paper. I saw doors opening, not for Jessica, for me. My isolation felt like a cliff edge I was standing on alone. I didn't have a person to call who knew all the layers. Sarah would listen, but she didn't know my family the way I did. She didn't know the little sigh Mom made before asking me to give up one more thing. She didn't know how Jessica could turn her voice sweet and cut you at the same time. I set my phone on Do Not Disturb and turned the face down again. There was a calm in that choice I hadn't felt in a long time. No interruptions, no last-minute voices asking me to be small. It's funny how a plan stops feeling like a plan and starts feeling like gravity. Every action we take has an equal pushback somewhere else. Jessica's actions had stacked heavy and unfair, and tomorrow they would slide, not because I screamed. Not because I broke down, because I would put the truth where it couldn't be ignored. That was the only thing that could balance what she'd done. I didn't imagine a happy ending. I didn't imagine smiles or hugs or any version of thank you. I pictured something quieter. White space on my phone screen, no buzzing, no guilt, no constant hum of someone else's problem rolling onto my plate. That silence felt like a warm bed made with fresh sheets. It felt like a key turning in a new lock. I scrolled through old photos one last time, me and Jessica in itchy sweaters on a school picture day, us in the cheap booth at the mall with silly faces, me at my college graduation with her hand thrown around my shoulder. I pressed my finger on the screen and deleted them, not out of hate but out of mercy for myself. I kept one photo, Dad and me at a county fair, a paper plate of fries in my hand, his arm around me, both of us grinning against the glare. I set that one as my home screen, then I put the phone down and lined up the two envelopes side by side. I whispered to the quiet room, "This is it." I slept lightly in and out like you do the night before a flight. When the sun finally pushed a soft gray into the room, my alarm buzzed once and I was already awake. I swung my legs out of bed and sat there for a second, feeling the cool floor under my feet. My stomach fluttered. I wasn't afraid. I was aware everything today had edges and I would have to move carefully around them. I showered and dressed slow, buttoning the white shirt with steady fingers. The suit jacket slid over my shoulders like a promise. I put in the small pearl earrings Dad gave me for my 21st birthday. They were quiet and real and didn't ask for attention. I ate half a granola bar and sipped water. I didn't paint my face, I kept it simple. I wanted to look like myself, not a new version made for a nicer crowd. Me. I checked the addresses again, though I knew them by heart. I slid Jessica's envelope and Mark's envelope into my tote, flat between a notebook and the inside pocket so they wouldn't bend. I tucked the water and tissues in too. I slipped my phone into the outside slot. I grabbed my keys and locked my door. The morning had the kind of bright, early light that makes everything look cleaner than it is. The air was cool and dry. I drove with the radio off, my hands at 10 and 2 like a driver's ed teacher would love. The streets near the church were busy, all soft colors and shined shoes and little hats perched at careful angles. I parked across the street under a tree and sat for a minute with the engine off, listening to the tick-tick sound it makes as it cools. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They looked steady. I picked up the tote and pulled one envelope out to feel its weight. You'd think paper would feel light. It didn't. It felt like a stone you find on a hike and slip into your pocket, a smooth one you keep touching to remind yourself you're real. I slid it back inside and breathed in slow through my nose, out through my mouth, the way I'd read about when your nerves make your heart race. Guests were starting to stream in through the church gates, glittering like pastel candies. Laughter lifted and fell in curls. A little girl in a tulle dress spun on the spot until her dad steadied her with a hand. The organist tested a few notes, warm and round, floating out into the morning air. Someone called to someone else across the courtyard, a happy "you made it." The whole place hummed like a beehive, every person with a job to do, smile, hug, sit, wait. None of them knew what was going to happen. None of them knew that behind the ribbon on the guest book table and the silk bows on the pews, a match was already struck. I wasn't here to ruin anyone's day. I was here to stop a theft in progress. I was here to stop a lie from turning into cement. I saw the limousine before I heard it. Long and black, it slid around the corner with slow dignity and rolled up to the curb. My heart didn't jump, it settled. I opened my door and stepped out. My heels clicked on the pavement, a steady metronome. I adjusted the strap of my tote and made sure the envelopes lay flat. I didn't look at my reflection in the window. I didn't need to. A woman I recognized from the planning meetings, Chloe, stood near the church doors with a clipboard pressed to her chest, her mouth set tight. She glanced at me and looked away, frowning, already annoyed by anything that didn't fit her timeline. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and started walking toward the curb. The organ music swelled inside the church, a soft wave rolling toward shore. The limousine door cracked open and then swung wide. I kept my pace even, sun flashed off chrome. The perfume of the bouquets drifted across the sidewalk, a sharp, sweet smell that almost made my teeth ache. I checked my breath not for mint but for steadiness. I could feel the suit on my shoulders the way you feel a hand you trust. I could feel the edges of the paper in my bag, small and strong. I could feel my own spine, straight and set. I walked the last few steps into the kind of silence that is just loud enough to be heard, and I lifted my hand. The limousine door opened like the lid of a music box, and out stepped Jessica. The dress was a frothy cloud of white, beaded and perfect. A few guests nearby actually gasped. She smiled at them, camera-ready and glowing, and then she saw me. The smile stalled. I watched confusion flicker across her face like a glitch, then anger. Her mouth tightened. "Kelly, what are you doing here? I told you." I didn't let her finish. I stepped forward and held out the first envelope. The cream looked almost golden in the sun. "This is for you," I said, calm and low, the way you talk to a skittish animal. She glanced at the envelope like it might bite her, then snatched it with a little rip of impatience. I kept my eyes on her face as she slid a finger under the flap, tugged, and pulled out the papers. The wind lifted a few edges of the dress, a pearl hairpin caught the light. The organist hit a warm run of notes from inside the church, and I saw the exact second the title at the top registered. Her eyes snagged on the header, paternity test results. Then they went down the page. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, I just watched her read the names. Mother, Jessica Watkins. Child, Leo Watkins. Alleged father, Mark Whitmore. Tested party, David Thorne. Her mouth parted. A soft sound came out of her, not a word, more like the air leaving a balloon. The color slid out of her face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. The bride mask cracked, and I saw the person underneath, the scared part, the calculating part, the part that knew exactly what this was. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, but it wasn't a question. It was a reflex, like pressing a hand to a wound. The bouquet in her left hand trembled. A bridesmaid, one I'd never met, hovered like a nervous bird on the sidewalk, eyes wide, clutching a clutch purse like it was a shield. A photographer lifted his camera, then lowered it again, sensing something he didn't want to catch. "You shouldn't have come," Jessica said, but it came out small and thin, not the cut glass tone she used when she wanted to win. The papers shook in her fingers. A breeze flipped the last page and showed the conclusion line again, dark and final. The smell of roses from her bouquet was too sweet. It pushed into my nose and made everything feel too bright. I forced myself to breathe slow. "I came," I said, steady, "to give you a chance." She blinked fast. Her throat worked. For a second, she looked like the girl I grew up with, the one who'd cried over a scraped knee and grabbed my hand when thunder shook the windows. Then something colder moved back into her eyes. She glanced over my shoulder toward the church doors, toward the safety of a planned day and a groom who didn't know. I lifted the second envelope just enough for her to see the name on the front. "Mark Whitmore, this is for him," I said, and her head snapped back to me. The muscles in her jaw clenched so hard I saw a little pulse in her cheek. "Here's how this goes," I said, like I was laying out how to tie a knot. "You walk into that church, you find Mark, and you tell him the truth before the music starts." Or, I tipped the second envelope toward the guest book table where a little sign said "Welcome" in curly letters. "I put this where he can't miss it." Her eyes widened, a trapped animal flash. She looked past me again, toward the limousine. The driver stood at the front, one hand on the door handle like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to open it or not. A few guests had noticed us now. Their chatter dipped and swelled. Someone whispered, "Is that her sister?" like I was a rumor that had just climbed out of the phone and onto the sidewalk. "You wouldn't," she said, but her voice didn't have enough breath in it. She sounded like someone arguing through a closed door. "I would," I said. We stared at each other the way you stare at a person you've been telling a story with your whole life and you suddenly realize they've been reading a different book the whole time. She looked down at the paper again as if the words might have changed. They hadn't. Her gaze hopped to the church, the doors, the limo, the guests, the envelope. Then her eyes hardened. That's when I knew she wasn't going to tell the truth. She was going to run. She took a stumbling step backward, the dress dragging heavy around her ankles like a net. The bouquet wobbled in her hand. "Driver," she hissed, the word tight and sharp. "Now, Jessica," I said, not loud, not pleading. Just her name, the way I'd said it 1,000 times in our kitchen, in our living room, in the dark at sleepovers when we were both small and believed in each other. For a heartbeat, it hung there. And then her heels slipped on the curb and she grabbed the edge of the door and she ducked into the limo in a rush of tulle and panic. The door slammed. I heard the muffled thump of her voice through the glass. "Go. Go." I didn't chase her. I didn't shout. I walked to the front of the limousine with steady steps. The driver looked from me to the door and back again, his eyes confused and scared. I met his gaze and gave him a small, nothing kind of smile, like I was someone's polite neighbor dropping off a casserole. Then I slid the envelope with Mark Whitmore under the driver's side windshield wiper. The heavy paper tucked beneath the rubber like it had been designed for that slot. The engine revved. The driver reached for the envelope like instinct, but I shook my head once. I didn't know if he saw or if he just froze because the world felt wrong. The limousine peeled away from the curb with a squeal of tires, leaving a smear of exhaust and a swirl of rose petals someone had sprinkled on the sidewalk. A little boy in a tiny suit pointed and laughed, thinking it was part of the show. Behind me, the organ swelled into the opening notes guests wait their whole lives to walk to. People turned toward the doors, expectant and smiling, unaware the star had just left the building. I took a step back, then another. Chloe barked something into a headset, her face losing whatever color the makeup had given it. I turned and walked down the street, each click of my heel a metronome, each breath a small, neat thing I could keep. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The day had taken its own shape. I didn't wait to see the rest. I didn't need a front row seat to a building I just set a match to. I hailed a cab, slid into the back seat, and gave my address. The driver glanced at my suit and then at the distant church, probably piecing together his own little story of a woman leaving a wedding early. He turned up the radio a notch. A summer song filled the car, light and forgettable. At home, I hung the suit jacket carefully over a chair. I drank a glass of water with both hands around it, feeling how cold moved through my fingers and into my wrists. Then I waited. The clock on my microwave ticked out the minutes, each one a quiet footstep further from the church. I didn't pace. I folded a blanket. I watered the snake plant. I watched a patch of sun move across my rug. 5 hours later, my phone buzzed with Mom's name. I let it go to voicemail. The message started as a roar, my name thrown like a rock. "What did you do? What did you do?" Her voice cracked on the second "do" and then kept going, a tumble of words sharp enough to cut. "Ruined, family, sick, monster." I didn't listen to the end. My thumb hovered a second over delete, then pressed. The sound of the trash file closing was soft, like a door pushed shut with care. Silence wrapped around me like a blanket. Not the kind that smothers, the kind that warms. The text started, then slowed. A few friends of friends sent question marks. An aunt tried another message, all fluff and flames. I put the phone face down and made tea. Steam curled up and I breathed it in. For the first time in months, my apartment felt like mine again. No buzzing, no demands. News reached me in pieces, the way gossip always does. Sarah called, voice low with the thrill of being there without being there. "They stopped the ceremony," she said. "Before it even started, people were just sitting, and then the whispers went through like somebody opened a window and let the weather in. Mark, he looked like he'd been hit. I heard he left with his dad. David wasn't. I don't know. Nobody could find Jessica." Her voice hesitated. "Are you okay?" "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. Drink some water." We both laughed, a tired, small sound. We hung up. The quiet came back clean and simple. A week later, the mailman rang my bell with a little double tap. "Signature," he said, holding out the tablet. The envelope he handed me was thick and stiff, my name typed neat in black ink. My heart didn't pound. It didn't need to. I knew what this was, the way you know rain means you should pull the laundry in. Inside, there was a cashier's check made out to me. The numbers printed there were clear as a bell, $50,000. Behind it, a short typed note on bank letterhead from the M. Whitmore Discretionary Trust. No apology. No sweet message, no pleading or threats, just a statement. I ran my finger along the edge of the check. The extra $10,000 wasn't a bow or a tip. I read it the way I was meant to read it. Payment for the truth, an acknowledgement of the risk I took, a clean closing of a messy account. Mark wasn't going to call me, he wasn't going to ask for a speech. He was sending what he could send from the place he had the power to send it from, and then he was moving forward. Good. I set the check down on the table where the envelopes had been and stared at it a moment. The paper felt heavier than it was, not because of money, because of what it meant. It meant someone had finally said, in the only language that mattered in this story, that I had been right to blow the whistle. It meant I could breathe without counting the cost of the next breath. I took the check to the bank, where the lighting is always too bright and the pens are always on chains. The teller smiled like she smiles at everyone. I slid the paper through the slot and she stamped some things I didn't care about and said, "All set." I walked out with a receipt and air on my face that felt cleaner. The rest trickled in over the next month like radio static you almost want to tune, but you don't. People talk. They always do. I learned enough. Mark filed to end the marriage they'd signed on paper days before the ceremony, and he did it fast. The reasons didn't need flowery words. The lab paper with its 4 names and 1 hard line at the bottom spoke for him. He also went for custody of Leo, and he got it, not because of blood. Because he'd been a real dad every day that mattered, and because his home was steady and safe and quiet. Leo would still see Jessica, but not on her terms anymore, on terms that kept him first. David Thorne lost his job at the firm the day after the non-wedding. It wasn't dramatic, at least not in public. One moment his name was on the website, the next it wasn't. The circles he and Jessica wanted to swim in turned cold. People don't like having the curtains yanked open on their own stages. They step away from the mess. They save their faces. David learned how fast doors can close when you've been smiling at the wrong camera. Jessica disappeared for a while, then reappeared in small places, looking smaller. She didn't get the glow she wanted. She got the kind of attention that sticks like gum to your shoe. People stopped inviting her to the places she'd worked so hard to stand in with her chin tilted up. Mom stuck by her, at least for a while. I didn't stick around to learn how that ended. I had my own ending to write. I took the $50,000 and didn't rush to buy an apartment. I bought time. I gave notice at my job. My boss blinked like he'd misheard me, asked if I needed a raise. "I need a life," I said, smiling. He didn't know what to do with that. I packed 2 suitcases and held up a one-way ticket at my kitchen counter, the thin slip of paper bending slightly in the middle. The world was big. It had always been big. I'd just been busy making myself small inside it. Before I left, I went by the bank one last time. I closed out a small account I'd kept for emergencies and put the emergency in the rear view. Outside, the sky was a hard, cheerful blue. I took a photo of the sidewalk, the kind of no-reason picture you take when you just want to remember a normal day. Then I deleted most of the remaining photos on my phone again, not from anger but from a clean need to travel lighter. I kept the same one I'd chosen, Dad and me at the fair, grease on our fingers, joy on our faces. My anchor. People will ask if I ever talked to Jessica or to Mom again. I didn't, not once. Not because I wanted them to hurt, but because I didn't want to play anymore. Silence isn't punishment. Sometimes it's just peace. These days, my phone sits quiet for long stretches, and when it lights up, it's because of things I chose: Sarah sending a picture of a sunset, a client thanking me for making their numbers make sense, a flight app reminding me it's time to check in. When I think about the beginning of all this, I see me at a computer, watching my savings drain out with a click, my stomach turning as the number dropped. That girl thought she had to pay to be allowed a seat at the table. The last image I keep now is me at the same kind of desk, sliding a check across to a teller and choosing myself. Less drama, more yes. There wasn't a trumpet in this story. There wasn't a curtain call. There was only a ledger I'd been carrying around in my head for years, full of lines with my name in the paid by column. One by one, I crossed them out, not because anyone paid me back, because I decided that account was closed. The books are balanced, the door is shut, and on the other side is a life that finally fits only me. That's how I took my life back. Sometimes the only way to heal is to drag the truth into the light. Have you faced a hard choice to protect yourself? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for more.